Hey there, Photo Universe. Okay, so we're back at it. Got a few things on the list today. First of all, the Patreon print. I've already put the video out there of making the print for the Patreon Print Club. We're 2 patrons away from having our first print giveaway, and so that's cool. Got a lot of stuff on the table here today. So the first thing I want to talk about is the learning curve. If you came up in the days of film, when you had a film camera like this venerable Pentax MX, when you went from one camera to another, there wasn't really a learning curve. Okay, I mean, because there were apertures and there were shutter speeds, and there was setting the ISO, but you know, it just was getting familiar with how does this camera set the shutter speeds, how does it set the apertures. This camera doesn't even have an aperture priority mode or a shutter priority mode. It's just completely manual. You set the shutter speed, you set the aperture, and away you go, and the ISO. But as film cameras went on, I have an old F100, I meant to bring that out too. With the F100, you know, the learning curve was, okay, well, how do I set my apertures? How do I set my shutter speeds? When do I use program? Because now I have a program mode. What are the different metering options? I mean, there's not much of a learning curve there. You could set the camera to all manual, and you put the same film in, nothing really changed, right? So you're just setting your shutter speed and your aperture, and you're setting your ISO, and away you go. Right now you can experiment with aperture priority, and you could experiment with, you know, there's not much of a learning curve there. Your images, the image quality isn't really going to change. Back in the film days, the learning curve, when things really, you had to test things, and because your image quality changed, was when you got a new film. Okay, when you put a different kind, when Fuji came out with Velvia, for example, if people were used to shooting Kodachrome or Ektachrome, I think the transition there was from Kodachrome to Velvia. If you were a professional photographer and you were used to getting certain results with Kodachrome, you had to buy 100 rolls of Fuji Velvia and go test it and learn how to tweak and get what you wanted out of Velvia and what the new palette was going to give you. Well, in digital photography, there is no film. And you would think that there's not that much, you know, of a difference when you go from one digital camera to another. And that's not the case. And I learned this when I went back in 2006 or 2007. I went from a Nikon D200, which I had completely dialed in. I knew what that sensor was giving me. I did a lot of work with that sensor, and it was great. I knew what I was going to get, and I knew how to tweak it to get what I wanted. And I figured, oh great, the D300's come out, I'm going to upgrade to that. So I upgraded to the D300, and I didn't change anything that I did, and all of a sudden I couldn't get a sharp shot, and the colors were off, and the weird things were happening, and I couldn't believe I couldn't get a sharp image. And it was weird. It took me about 6 months to dial that camera in to the point where I was comfortable with it. And this was shooting a lot. I mean, I was shooting a lot back then, and it took me about 6 months to dial that camera in. And what had changed was the sensor. The sensor responded completely differently than the D200 did. Okay, so moving forward to today, you know, I am absolutely 100% comfortable with the K32S and the K32 and those sensors and what they'll give me. When the K3 first came out, I've made a bunch of videos on all of a sudden people weren't getting sharp images. Well, part of it was the sensor, part of it was the automatic settings, the default settings that Pentax came out with, that the camera was set to out of the box. But now, having used these cameras for 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, you know, it's a known quantity. I go out with my K5 II, I go out K5 IIS, my K3 II. I go out with those. I know exactly what I'm doing, what I'm going to get. I know when I bring the images in, I know the workflow, how to post-process them to get the most out of them. there's no mysteries there. There's no surprises, okay? When I was fooling around with the Fuji cameras, again, there was a learning curve to learn the X-Trans sensor and how to get the most out of them, how to post-process them, etc., etc. To a point where, like with Fuji, and this is my last Fuji, it's the X100S. Basically, I shoot this camera on JPEG because I've never ever gotten RAWs from Fuji that were as good as I can get with the JPEGs. And yeah, I know that there's people out there. You can tweak you get the different RAW processors and whatever it is. There's I don't know the names of them. I just never dealt with it. But the X-Trans sensor, if you shoot Fuji, like there's a huge learning curve there. You know, if you're going to shoot RAW. But the interesting thing about Fuji is the JPEGs are so good right out of camera. All right, so what prompted this video is I'm right now going through. It's very easy to say to yourself, okay, these cameras are too big and too heavy. I want to get into Micro Four Thirds. I hear everybody raving about them. Some people are getting great results. Some people are not happy and they're switching back, etc., etc. And I'll tell you right now, and the problem with Micro Four Thirds is it's really easy to say, to buy one of these cameras, go out and shoot it and go, oh, I'm getting soft results. Well, you know, I'm not getting the results I want. The image quality sucks. There's a lot of noise, etc., etc. And just dismiss the whole thing and go, well, it's that tiny sensor. That's the problem. And I'll tell you right now, I don't think so. I think the problem is that there's a learning curve. There's a workflow that you need to get. If you're going to shoot RAW with Olympus, you need to, I've gotten better results processing in Olympus Camera View 3 or whatever it is, the Olympus program to process the RAWs. That was a huge improvement. Olympus JPEGs are really good. Not as good as the Fuji, but I would say they're the second best JPEGs out there. I have no problems with the Olympus JPEGs. I shoot RAW plus JPEG at the weddings, and I pretty much deliver the JPEGs, and I just use the RAWs as a backup. I just use the RAWs to, in case there's a shot that I really need to do something to. I just like having them. You know, storage is cheap. But to be honest with you, I haven't really touched a RAW wedding image in a few years now, which is interesting. So with M4 III, you know, if you're used to any other camera, and you come to a new camera, whatever it is, even within same brands like D200 to D300 Nikon, that was amazing to me. That really taught me a lesson, and it's an easy lesson to forget, because I came into M4 III and in the beginning, it's like, you know, the reason I held on, I've been with Olympus now for a year, trying to integrate it into my systems, because of the size and the weight. I just love shooting these cameras, but the results need to be as good as, right, or usable, and it's been hit or miss, honestly. And I think a lot of that is the learning curve. Just you know, knowing what the system's going to get you, getting used to that viewfinder, and etc., etc. So if you get an M4 III camera and you're a month into it and you don't like the results, you know, all I can tell you is that there's a learning curve. Stick with it. You know, if you're trying to make 40 by 60 inch fine art prints, yeah, maybe that's not the right camera system for you, okay? But if you're not getting sharp results at 12 by 18 with an M4 III, it's not the camera. You haven't figured it out yet. You haven't paid your dues with the learning curve, and that's where I am right now. It's getting better, which is cool because I'm sticking with it, and I'm working through it. And I'm taking the attitude of, oh, it's not, you know, I'm not taking the attitude of, oh, it's a tiny sensor, and so therefore obviously it's crap, right? I'm not taking that attitude. The attitude I'm taking is, this should be able to make a very sharp fine art 12 by 18 print, okay? And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, I'm analyzing it and going, okay, what is the problem here, okay? Workflow, bring it into Olympus View 3, convert to a 16-bit TIFF, bring that into PaintShop Pro, and then tweak or do whatever I need to do. That's my work controller right now. Recently, as of like last week, I upgraded to PaintShop Pro 2018, and I'm very impressed. And Lightroom's I'm kind of done with Lightroom. PaintShop Pro does everything I needed to do, particularly with the Olympus cameras. I don't need the damn data. What is that? DAM. It stands for organizational software. You know, the thing that tracks and manages all your files. Data asset management. Yeah, I don't need that. I'm an old DOS guy from 8086 Intel chips. You know, I'm used to the tree view. I know where all my photos are, and I set them up on the hard drive in my own tree. Lightroom always added an extra layer of complexity, which, you know, yeah, I know I can tag it and all this stuff, but that's not the way I work. But I do like, the thing I did like in Lightroom was the quick ability to quickly view the images and then edit them. But you know what? PaintShop Pro does that for me. You go to you know, the manage your photograph section, and I can see all of them, and I pull them right into PaintShop Pro, and it's like pulling it right into Photoshop. I don't need all those adjustments, but they're there. Okay, so the last thing I'd like to talk about tonight is the traps that we fall into. Okay, and I remember when I got my first DSLR way back in the early 1980s. Okay, and I got a Pentax ME Super, which looked a lot like this, but the Pentax ME Super had aperture priority mode. Okay, that was the auto mode of the day. All right, and so I learned just enough to be dangerous. I didn't know anything about photography. And what I did, and I'm not the only person, okay? So you get your ME Super, and you get your, which was real typical of the day. Back in the early 1980s, the cutting edge of consumer cameras was aperture priority. That was like the new thing, okay? So the Nikon had an aperture priority camera, and Canon, and that's what people were buying, all right? And so what you learned was that you put it on aperture priority, and you got to keep your shutter speed fast enough so your pictures aren't blurry. Well, you're shooting, you know, well, back then it was like 200 speed film was fast film, and so, or even 100 speed film, and you were always taking pictures, you know, whatever you were taking pictures of. So you had, if you had a 51.8 lens, which was typical, maybe you sprung for the 51.4. You would set, and you'd go to take your picture, and you'd see your shutter speed was like 1/15 of a second. You're like, yeah, it's not going to be, you know, you never thought a tripod was anything that you needed, right? And so you'd open up your aperture to 1.8. And so I had, they're long gone, but I had rolls and rolls of film shot, you know, at one point, you know, wide open, because I was trying to boost up that shutter speed. You know, and until I became a professional photographer and realized that, you know, with 100 speed film, I need to be on a tripod 95% of the time. It's rare that I can take a snapshot. You know, rare that I can take a good photograph. You know, so everything was shot. So that was the trap with the film cameras back in the day. The trap today is, okay, you get your M4 let's just, or your K5 or whatever it is, your K32S. Let's take the K32S. This is the K5 but it doesn't matter. Let's say it's K3. All right, so you take your K3, you set it to program, you got image stabilization, and you set your auto ISO to 3200, and you're away with the mixer. Like, you never have to use a tripod. So you just snap, 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 and it's all going to work, right? And you end up with the most mediocre photographs you've ever seen in your life. And I've been doing that. It's a trap, okay? And recently I said to my, you know, and I've been doing that not at weddings or anything like that. That's a different program. That's a flash and a bracket and all that. But I've been doing that for my around the house shots and my goofing off shots, etc. You know, and I'm saying to myself, like, you know, now I got this 3 to 4 stops image stabilization, 5 stops image stabilization in the Olympus. You know, it's a crutch, right? And what it does is, and you end up taking really, really mediocre photographs. And the other day I said to myself, I'm going to stop this. If I don't have enough light, like I'm going to pick my my ISO for what I want to shoot, and then I'm going to, you know, I'm not going to rely on auto this and auto that. I'm going to get control back, go to aperture priority, and stop this program nonsense. And you know what? Instantly my photographs improved. So there's your bottom line. Now, if all you see, because I know better, I've been doing this for a long time, but if you don't know, okay, and you know you're on program right now, and you're on image stabilization, get yourself a tripod, number one. And if you have the opportunity and you want to see how sharp your stuff can be, slow down. Okay, take your time, put it on a tripod, pick the lowest ISO you can go, which is you know 100 or 200 base ISO, which is the best. You know, it's image quality maximization. So that means what are the parameters? Lowest ISO that's native to your camera. On the Olympus, that's 200, and the Pentax, it's 100. Okay. Shutter speed, if you're on a tripod, doesn't matter, right? Aperture, f8 on the Pentax, f5.6 is on the Olympus. On a full frame, it's going to be f8, f11. Okay, on the Pentax, maybe it's 5.6. On the Olympus, maybe it's f4. You know, somewhere in the middle. It's not wide open and it's not all the way closed down. That's the maximum. So that's what you want for maximum sharpness. Make sure the camera's steady. Those are really the three parameters, right? Lowest ISO you can get, shutter speed. If you're on a tripod, it doesn't matter. Rule of thumb is, you know, double the focal length of the lens you're using, particularly with crop cameras. With full frame, it's not as, you know, it's the focal length of the lens you're using. So you're using a 50mm lens, 1/60th of a second. On a crop camera, that would be 1/125th of a second. You know, and then get your aperture closed down a couple of stops. So if your lens is f2.8, close it down to f5.6. But basically, shoot everything at f5.6. You can't go wrong, if you can get away with that. Now, that's what you should strive to shoot at for maximum image quality for all your shots. When you deviate from that, know why you're deviating from that. Okay, so you're walking around outside and it's a bright sunny day. Well, you know, you have to deviate maybe. You have to close down to f11 because there's too much light. All right, or you can bump your shutter speed up, right? So stay at f5.6, bump your shutter speed up. You know, shutter speed doesn't really affect image quality. The only way shutter speed affects image quality is if you get blur, because the camera's moving or the subject's moving. And you may want to add blur, all right? With your aperture, f5.6, f8 is the sharpest your lens is ever going to be. If you deviate from that, you're doing it for a reason. Maybe you want shallow depth of field, you open up wide. Maybe you want extended depth of field, you close down to f11. Shallow depth of field, f2.8, f2, whatever your lens will go to. You know, but there has to be reasons for why you're deviating. But where you want to start for maximum image quality is lowest ISO, native ISO of your camera, shutter speed. Okay, that's shutter speed, that's the reciprocal of your lens, or double that for crop cameras, and then your aperture on your lens, f5.6, f8, and go from there. And you're going to realize that if you're going to be at f8 or f5.6 and you're going to be at ISO 100 or 200, unless you're outside on a sunny day, you need a tripod. That's the bottom line. And you can't be, you know, if you're indoors with no light, you can't be taking pictures of kids running around. You know, that's what flash was made for. So, now, does that mean you can't get shots you're happy with not doing those things? Yeah, you might be, you know, sure. If you're happy with your kids running around in the dark living room and the blurry, I'm not saying they're not bad photographs. I've taken some photographs I like, but you maximize the possibility of keepers by maximizing the image quality. You know, the right parameters for the shot, right? The important thing is to get the shot. So when in doubt, push the button, take the shot. You always do the best you can. These aren't rules, these are rules of thumb, which means like if you want to do get the best image quality, get a tripod, do what I said with the aperture, with the ISO, with the shutter speed. Okay. So that's Ed with Photo Universe, and that's the tips and the stories for this week. And I appreciate it, and the Patreon supporters are awesome. And like I said, we need 2 more Patreon supporters, and then we're mailing out a free print to one of them. The first print giveaway will happen when we reach 10 Patreon supporters, and so far so good, and excellent. So that's Ed with Photo Universe. Thanks for watching. Have a good one, and we'll catch you next week. Okay.